Security operatives repel jailbreak attempt on Jos Correctional Center.
Imo State government clarifies report alleging death of animals at zoological garden.
The kind of impression created by those publications is nowhere near the truth at all.
Kaduna State government restores telecommunications service in 4 local government areas.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the latest bailout funds to states.
About 2 weeks ago, President Muhammadu Buhari approved the release of 656.1 billion naira to the states of the Federation to cushion the effects of their ongoing payment of earlier bailout facilities, as well as to enable them meet their salary obligations.
A breakdown of the latest bailout package indicates that each state of the Federation would get 18.6 billion naira in 6 tranches over the next 6 months to be repaid over a 30-year period. And the loan facility, we understand, has a 2-year moratorium at an interest rate of 9%.
And the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, indicated also that already the modalities of the facility have been worked out and the disbursement is expected to commence by the Central Bank of Nigeria very soon.
Now, Juma, that will be the 4th multi-billion naira bailout for states in 6 years. Already, financial experts have aggregated that some 1.75 trillion naira has been released to the 36 states of the Federation in bailout grants in the past 6 years, beginning with the salary bailout in 2015, the excess crude facility in 2016, and the budget support facility in 2017.
There have been divergent opinions among Nigerians since the latest bailout facility to states was made public. While some analysts see the federal government as magnanimous and considerate in assisting the federating units financially, others think the subnationals are being spoon-fed and not being made to maximize potentials in terms of internally generated revenue.
Now, there are also those who argue as well that instead of the fresh bailout, which I think amounts to repaying debt with debt, the federal government could have waived a substantial part of the 3 earlier bailouts already granted or otherwise extended the repayment period. There have also been calls for an audit of the various loan facilities released to the states in the last 6 years to ascertain how well they were utilized by the governments.
Now, how will the loan facility to states impact the economy? Are there monitoring mechanisms towards efficient utilization of these funds? There are some of the issues that we will engage our panel of guests in the course of the program. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. I am Juma Yusuf.
And I am Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Jumai to also welcome you to the live program, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, in the course of which we have complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review and business. Right now, here is Ifeoma Ojinta, who has the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Ifeoma.
Good morning, Kingsley and Juma. Good morning, Nigeria, and here is the morning news. Following yesterday's attack on the medium security custodial center in Jos Plateau State by gunmen, the police has rearrested 7 escapees, while 1 voluntarily surrendered himself to the force. According to the Public Relations Officer, Nigerian Correctional Service, Francis Enobore, the invaders stormed the custodial center at about 5:20 p.m. Sunday with sophisticated weapons and immediately made for the main gate, where they engaged armed personnel in a gun battle before breaking into the yard. They were, however, trapped within as men from sister security services immediately mobilized to assist the armed guards, cordoned off the entire area and subdued the firing power of the attackers. Telecommunications service has been restored in 4 local government areas of Kaduna State. About 2 months ago, Kaduna State government suspended telecommunications service in Chikun, Igabi, Giwa, Breningwari, and some parts of Kaduna North local government areas as part of measures to contain security challenges.
The prolonged application of this measure was always out of the question due to its impact on the legitimate activities of citizens and businesses. Residents are advised that the restoration of full services in the affected areas may unfold over a few days as the service providers mobilize to power and boost their transmission systems accordingly.
In the same vein, telecommunication services are to be restored in all parts of Zamfara State by Tuesday, 30th November 2021. Zamfara State Governor Bello Muhammad, who said this while addressing APC chieftains and delegates at the State Congress of the party held in Gusau, explained that the decision is based on improvements in the security situation across Zamfara State in recent times. 2 persons are feared dead while goods worth millions of naira were destroyed in a petrol tanker fire that occurred Sunday morning around the rail crossing of Lafenwa Market in Abeokuta, Ogun State.
Apparently from a place, maybe there was a spark, I can't confirm that now, but there was fire. And all we had to do was to cordon off the place. First, to ensure that miscreants did not take advantage of the situation.
I deployed my men to the scene of the fire. Unfortunately, the hoodlum did not allow us to perform our duty. So they attacked our vehicle. The vehicle has already been damaged. All my men has been brutalized.
Facts surrounding a newspaper publication alleging the death of 205 animals resulting from starvation at the Imo State Zoological Garden are beginning to emerge. The Commissioner for Culture, Tourism and Creative Arts in the state described the allegation as false.
Found that there had been some swine flu of some sort that affected some of our pigs. But these are domestic animals kept for feeding the animals in the zoo. These are 2 different things we're talking about. As for the animals in the zoo, well, unless an animal dies a natural death or something happens, but as for the kind of impression created by those publications, it's nowhere near the truth at all.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Jumei after this break.
The Visa Switchover project, which is commonly referred to as DSO, which entails television channels switching from analog to digital broadcasting. It's one of the biggest projects embarked upon by this administration. Branded as Free TV, offers its viewers about 60 digital channels, including sports, music, movies, and news. The federal government has licensed about 23 set-top box manufacturers. 7 of them have self-production, employing several thousands of people. We've made it now compulsory for all stations in Nigeria to only broadcast productions made in Nigeria for products which are produced in Nigeria.
He's falling sick so frequently, either fever or stomachache. I keep him away from junk food.
She also feeds me apples. She says an apple a day keeps...
If you want to keep germs away, then also wash your hands regularly with Dettol soap.
Meaning?
Germs and disease spread through the hand also. For this, use Dettol soap. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol soap is endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association. Be Dettol sure.
Now everybody knows I'm the man. Ooh, happy man. Ooh, happy
Enjoy the reward that sharing brings with the Airtel Family Plan. Get bonus talk time, SMS, and data for each family member you share with. Dial *141# now.
Now everybody knows that.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
My son has always dreamt of being in the spotlight. That's why I give him Bornvita for everyday vitality that gives him the strength to pursue his dreams. Bornvita, strength to dream.
Everybody knows the secret to good cooking is that special ingredient. The mothers know it, but does this new generation know it? Let's find out. Mothers, daughters, are you ready? Yeah! Let the cooking begin.
Erisco tomato paste.
Now we get home, now we get love,
now we get children.
With a spice of world,
with a meal so great and so healthy.
You know we've got your back. Oh,
with Erisco, Rigico, Nagico.
Ladies and gentlemen, food is ready.
Food of love. For the yum yum for the
Erisco Rigico and Nagico tomato paste is made by Erisco Foods Limited, feeding Africans with healthy foods.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. On business news, Nigerian youth advocate sustainable and smart solutions to grow small businesses in the country. Details with Comfort Amadou.
The call to grow small businesses in the country gains traction as more youths in the country position to meet increasing economic demands through creation of viable startups. Already, government's commitment to the growth and development of small startups in the country is encouraging creative innovations amidst the COVID-19 pandemic.
Because the African market is a huge market, and we think with ACFTA, if we can position ourselves very well, we can be able to gain the most value out of the market.
For LV Sabuyere, it is time for young entrepreneurs to take strategic steps towards establishing viable businesses as the federal government works towards creating market access in the CFTA.
If you are running away from Nigeria and think that Nigeria is not working, who will not build Nigeria? So you as a young person, if you can discover yourself in this category, have a right standing, build your life, build credibility, build brand, build name, and build integrity, men will invest in you.
Trade experts posit that AfCFTA will increase Nigerians' potential for business growth and export to other regions.
We're at that crossroads now. And with the opening of the African Continental Free Trade Area, you don't want to become a dumping ground. How don't you become a dumping ground? You must manufacture more, you must produce more, and then you must export.
The president, ECO's Trade Promotion Organization Network, says it is pertinent for Nigeria to scale up productivity to meet up with global demand for goods and services. With business news, Comfort Amadou.
Thank you very much, Comfort, for the business package. Coming up next is Newspaper Review.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayer Tube, is in the studio. Good morning, Bayer.
Thank you, Jume. Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley.
Hope you had a restful weekend.
Yes, I did.
Okay, let's begin with the Punch newspaper this morning. And above the masthead, we have banks' earnings hit 2.64 trillion naira in 9 months. You find details on page 20. Power generation falls by 849.2 megawatts. Gencos blame consumers. Details on page 20. Ramaphosa visits Omicron. Virologists differ as FG lists delegates for testing on day 2. With kickers, South African delegates to present negative PCR test results. That's coming from the federal government. Isolate test delegates on arrival or postpone visits, says Tomori. Details on page 2. At the side piece of the Punch newspaper, brain drain. We are exporting our best doctors, says NMA president. You find details on page 3. Nigeria's exchange rates discouraging investors, fueling inflation. That's attributed to the World Bank. You find the details on page 20. FG bans 91 billionaires VIPs jets, insist on 30 billion naira duty. With riders, top pastors, business moguls, banks, and all firms' CEOs affected. NCEA, FAN, NAMA get letters to ground affected planes. Aviation Ministry, Customs on warpath overflight ban directive. You find all the details on page 19. And the picture story you see there, motorists, commuters groan in Lagos-Ibadan road gridlock. Federal government says diversion will last 6 days. You find details on page 4 and 5. Plateau Assembly member dies after leg operation. Details on page 9. Minister proposes castration for rapists, sexual perverts. You find details on page 9. Onayakon makes strong case for Almajiri review, insurgency link. You find details on page 8. At the bottom of the Punch newspaper, as an introvert, I shouldn't have been in politics. That's coming from the former president of Nigeria, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. You find details on page 8. 10 abducted Kaduna local government staff freed. Bandits collect 40 million naira, demand motorbikes for victims. Details on page 9. Gunmen evade Jos prison, trapped in premises. You find that on page 30. Kinsley.
Thank you, Jumai. That last headline you read about gunmen evading Jos prison, that's also a story on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper by way of photographs. It's not the lead story, it's the second lead. If you see the 3 photographs there on the front page of the Daily Trust, a screenshot of the Jos Custodial Center after the attack. And the headline reads, gunmen trapped after attacking Jos prison. Below that, we have the following headlines. Ticket racketeering. Passengers stranded at Rigasa train station. That's in Kaduna. Mobilized to grab power in 2023. IU tells youth. And federal government sets March 2022 target for Ajaokuta audit. Now, let's go back up again, this time immediately below the nameplate of the Daily Trust newspaper. You have school children in captivity. Federal Government College, Birnin Yauri, 167 days. Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, that's 149 days. 1 year after, residents remember 48 farmers killed at Sabamari. That's on page 6. COVID-19. Don't punish Africa for Omicron variant. And that's attributed to Additional. This is Dr. Akinwumi Additional, president of the African Development Bank, saying, don't punish Africa for Omicron variant. And the lead story comes with a kicker, Yuletide. Hard times for air travelers as ticket prices double. Flights to South fully booked. Booking racketeering booms. Airlines use festive period to recover losses. And we have no power to fix prices. That's according to the NCA. Bio.
Thank you, Kinsley. Let's have a story about gunmen who, at 5:20 p.m. yesterday, attempted to break into Jos Correctional Center. They were resisted by armed guards and later on succeeded in gaining entry and got themselves trapped in the custodian center. Men of other security services were mobilized to assist the armed guards, and their firepower were subdued and they are trapped in the correctional center itself. Now, the interesting thing is that the correctional center is located along Joseph Gomwalk Highway and is situated between the police headquarters and State Department services. So it was very easy to mobilize to support them. So they have conveniently gotten themselves in prison. Already, about 7 inmates who managed to escape have quietly returned, and one other had been captured. The concern about commuters stranded is not only on the airline because of high prices, but also at the Kaduna, the Abuja-Kaduna rail line. Unscrupulous middlemen are colluding with workers of the Nigerian railway to embark in what has been described as ticket racketeering. Unfortunately, the e-ticketing system of the Nigerian railway has said to be down. People are not able to buy ticket, and therefore, when passengers get to the railway station, instead of being sold ticket at the ticketing window, they are told tickets are not available. And you find middlemen approaching passengers, wanting to sell ticket that's meant to be 3,000 for 7,000. The earlier this is nipped quickly in the bud, the better for Nigeria Railway, that will be losing a lot of revenue services. Also in Abeokuta, Lafenwa area, a petrol tanker overturned and spilled its contents. Unfortunately, a grandmother and the daughter were the first victims, and they were burnt beyond recognition. Sadly, operatives of the Ogun State Ogun Traffic Corporation Limited, as well as the fire service that went there, were attacked by hoodlums. The hoodlums were believed to have been scooping petrol, but when they were told to stop, they were believed to have ignited the fire. Unfortunately, their intention was to steal from some of the shops around the area. The vehicles belonging to the Ogun State Transport Corporation were vandalized, just as fire service, engine services of the fire brigade were also vandalized. The police public relations officer, Abubakar Abimbola Weyemi, says that 5 suspects have been arrested and they will soon be charged to court. There's a latest development reported in the Daily Trust, and it relates to the issue of the Federal High Court in Abuja Friday proscribing bandits group Yan Bindiga and Yan Ta'ada as terrorists. The federal government in the motion said that an affidavit before the court that intelligence report affirmed that bandit groups masterminded several killings, abductions, rapes, kidnapping, and other acts of criminality in the northeast, north central, and other parts of the country. The Director of Public Prosecution told the court that President Muhammadu Buhari gave approval for their proscription. Justice Taiwo granted the prayer and declared Yambindiga and Yanta'ada and other similar groups in any part of Nigeria as terrorists and illegality. The court ordered the proscription to be gazetted and also published in 2 newspapers. But the latest development is that the Sheikh Ahmed Gumi has said that bandits are committing terrorism, but they are not terrorists. He says bandit is a vague description and asks what is being declared. He asks 2 rhetorical questions. He says, what exactly is being declared? He also says, you want to say that headsmen are terrorists. Secondly, IPOB declared terrorists. How has that changed? So he says that extrajudicial killing of the headsmen is a major factor that has led to the banditry. And they justify their attacks, their criminality, from their experiences in the hands of rogue, what he described as rogue security agencies. So headsmen are resorting to banditry because they have been cruelly attacked by rogue security agents. So criminality now apparently trying to justify one evil with the other one. Meanwhile, sadly, the district police officer in Esako Central has been kidnapped. He was traveling in a car with his orderly in Mufti when gunmen fired at his car and grabbed him. He's oddly succeeded in escaping. But the commissioner of police in Edo State said there's no cause for alarm. The police is under their trail and they will be able to get them.
Well, for that story, there's a report that the abductors of the divisional police officer in Fuga asking for a ransom of 50 million naira. That's the latest report with regard to that incident. There are a number of stories that will require follow-up comments. The comment by Sheikh Gumi to say, look, what does it mean? I think the simple reference will be to say, look, go and read the judgment by the Federal High Court judge. And was it meaningless for the Attorney General of the Federation to have filed that action ex parte? Certainly not. There are good grounds for filing that action. And sometimes you wonder the utility of some of these comments when they come with a grave matter of national importance. Thousands of persons have been kidnapped in just a few months. And some of these kidnappers are also operating as bandits. And we have seen what has happened. And as I said, anyone who is interested in querying what has happened should read the full decision or the order by the Federal High Court judge. That's one. There was a story we had on our news bulletin this morning, and it had to do with the Imo State Commissioner for Tourism responding. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago,
yes,
there was a photograph
of a lion,
of an emaciated lion. It was published by the Nation newspaper. We don't have a Nation newspaper here this morning. Where part of the footage I was shown showed other animals in the zoo. These are lower range animals, but not. Do you have a lion in that zoo? That is one question to ask. I don't have access to the full interview with the commissioner, but what the photograph said was that that lion was among several other animals that had been starved. And we, of course, raised alarm as to the state of that particular lion. The question that we should expect answers to be, do you have a lion in your zoo? If you have a lion, show us the photograph or show us the video of the lion or the lions. And if you have taken steps to ensure that the animals are now well fed and well catered for, that will also be good news. Show us the footage, show us the photographs, not just simply being dismissive and saying that the earlier reports do not represent the true state of affairs. The report, of course, had the caption talking about the number of animals that had died, but it said that that lion was from that zoo. Do you have any such lion in your zoo?
He didn't give us any visual impression, to back up his claim that, most animals there don't die because of starvation. I think they should have looked deep into it and find solutions. Feeding these animals, I believe there's a budget for this kind of thing. What happens to the money?
I think is it the national, it's not the National Guard, what's the name of the agency that is responsible for the zoos around the country?
Something.
They should take the bold initiative to inquire what has been published or has been put in public domain. That will go a long way in saving the nation the embarrassment. And a hungry animal is a dangerous animal. Don't keep such
follow up on that.
Talking about banditry now.
I'm sorry, just before you go ahead with that, what has happened in Jos is good news, and it's also bad news. We have had a number of incidents of attacks on correctional facilities, otherwise known as prisons. We have also had a number of incidents of jailbreaks in recent times. Now, the security forces, of course, pooled their resources and were able to repel the assailants, and they probably got some of them trapped inside. It is how they will not come out that is the issue, unless they were on a suicide mission. We don't want to get into the details of how that is being done. Usually there are ways of negotiating with persons who are so entrapped. But obviously, if they came in there as unknown gunmen, at the end of the day, if any one or two of them is alive, they will become known gunmen. That's one. But what has happened now is in contradistinction to what happened last year during the NSAS protest. If you recall, there were jailbreak incidents in 2 correctional facilities in Benin.
Yes.
And I did say that at least one of those centers, the one on Sapler Road, it's not a huge distance from the police command headquarters, from the DSS state office, and even from the 4th Brigade. So if they had mobilized on that occasion, we knew that, of course, there were attacks previously on police facilities, and perhaps they might have had their reasons for not responding. But if they had responded, the hundreds of inmates who bolted from those two facilities could, of course...
1,887.
That's right. As I said, hundreds. Yes, so by almost nearly 2,000 could have been taken in. Bayo.
Thank you very much. I was trying to draw attention to the development in Kaduna. A bandit leader known as Yelu Magaji, otherwise known as Arushe, has been neutralized. He is said to be among the kingpin who are responsible for kidnapping and abduction of people along the Kaduna-Abuja highway. This happened when they raided his area in Megero in the Chukwu local government area. Meanwhile, Kaduna State government has also lifted the ban on telecommunication services. This has affected 4 local governments, Chukwu, Igabi, Biriningwari, and Kaduna State local government area. However, the commissioner in charge of internal security, Samuel Arua, has announced that citizens should be very patient and allow some time for the telecom agencies to switch on their full activities to cover the local governments that were initially locked down. However, he has announced also that ban or prohibition of motorcycles in the state still remain, and military operations are underway. He says that the lifting of the ban of telecommunication is coming from the tremendous success that has been achieved in combating the criminals. You will recall also that a day earlier, Zamfara has also opened up the telecom services, which has become a serious impediment to business and other activities.
I read those stories, Bayo, and my colleague Jumai, and I said good news, but also a lot of concern. And I'm saying this from the legal constitutional point of view. Who is the competent authority to freeze telecommunication services? Is it the state government, or is it the federal government through its agency?
The agency is the Nigeria Communications Commission.
So, of course, in the early part when Katsina did that, Katsina did say that the security services had advised and so on and so forth, and perhaps those steps and procedures were followed. I'm not talking about the security, I'm just talking about the exercise of the power. Who is the as we say in law, who is the competent person to say, look, shut down telecommunication services or restore telecommunication services? You can answer that question by having regard to a hypothetical situation as well. Who is the competent authority in Nigeria to declare a no-fly zone?
Federal government.
Well, in the case of...
Like it happened in Maiduguri, it was the federal government that shut down network services in Maiduguri for more than 6 months and restored it after 6 months. So I think it should be the federal government's prerogative to do that.
In the case of Katsina, there was a security order signed by the governor, and which entailed the shutting down of telecommunications. And my estimation is that the appropriate agency will have acted in accordance with the order of the state government. It's not to say that it was the state government that probably went and then switched off all the
the
services.
state government that is saying
because
that telecommunications
first of all, there was
back.
a request by the security that they needed that. The state government acceded by making pronouncement on giving orders, and the appropriate authorities acted accordingly.
Okay.
That is
I mean, that's what I'm just saying, but it's just to be sure who the proper authority is, because if you take a look at the legislative list, posts, telegraph, and telephones, that would say P&T in those days, post and telecommunications, with the remit of the federal authorities. I'm not saying begin to compete. The security imperative is there, but so that Bayo and Jumai, going forward, you don't hear a situation one day where there's a knee-jerk reaction by a local government chairman or by a government saying, look, XYZ local government shut down the telecommunications.
That's never going to happen. I don't think so.
Well, I don't know.
Well, talking about legality, the Minister of State for Labor and Employment has opined that the Lagos State panel set up to probe the police brutality may be illegal. He says he's not speaking on behalf of government, but he is speaking as an inner bar, a senior advocate of Nigeria. But his opinion is not that of government. He described what has happened, that by law, Lagos State government empowers the governor to inquire into any person and chieftaincy matters that will promote public good. Any person is also defined in that law to mean that public officers of the state. And he argues that the law also says that it has to be within the legislative competencies of Lagos State. Therefore, Lagos State cannot inquire into the conduct of persons over which they have no control. In this instance, he's saying the police and the armed forces and the military are not officers of Lagos State, and therefore, being federal government officers, Lagos State, by virtue of that law, cannot constitutionally inquire into the activities. He went on to explain and also cited an instance that a panel report can be illegal. He pointed out how the Supreme Court ruled that Justice Oputa's report was,
on that note,
perfect.
thank you so much for coming this morning.
We can't debate that
Yes,
now.
we
I
can't
referenced
debate
that when we
we're
were
out of
discussing
time.
it last week about
Yes.
the Oputa panel and the Supreme Court decision. But there have also been rejoinders to what Festus Koyamo has said. I mean, if you go to a number of chat groups for the legal profession, there are all kinds of positions that have also been raised to counter it. But I'm sure that going forward, there will be the opportunity of discussing that.
Every issue like 2 coins, there will be.
It's going to go on for some time, actually.
Thank you.
All right, Bayo, deep thanks for being around. See you again tomorrow. It's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll get ahead with our item for discussion. The latest bailout to the states.
The NOA, for example, has succeeded a great deal in sensitization during the pandemic, and we have found the community mobilization officers most effective in the sensitization and in the advocacy campaigns, creating awareness on the coronavirus pandemic. We have done this through the production of jingles, which were very widely distributed in different languages, in English, in Hausa, in Yoruba, in Igbo, in Tiv, in Igala, in Kanuri, in Fulfulde, in Ijo, in Isoko, in Bini, in talk of any other language you can think of.
Ovaltine, 3 in 1. It has great taste.
Big day ahead.
Yummy, yummy, full of nourishment and vitality. Active bodies and shock minds. So yeah, Ovaltine, 3 in 1. Ovaltine, 3 in 1.
New Ovaltine 3-in-1. Smart choice for smart kids.
We started with a very aggressive response from the very beginning. If you remember the very first case in Nigeria, very well contained, very few infections arose from that. We started airport screenings and temperature checks way before anyone really understood what was going on. On the front lines of the response, the team here at the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, supported all the 36 states. At some point, we had teams in 32 of our 36 states concurrently, leading the response, the emergency operations centers, making sure we're getting the surveillance data, building up our information resources on our website. Our website became one of the most visited websites on the continent, as many other African countries were looking to the leadership Nigerians provided. At our Incident Coordination Center, people were working literally 14, 15 hours every single day.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The Council of Our Fathers.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
You're on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service. And to begin our conversation, which is on bailout funds to states, here is a correspondent, Abdusalami Abubakar, with the background report.
President Muhammadu Buhari has approved a fresh 656 billion naira bridge financing facility to the 36 states as announced at the last National Economic Council meeting. According to the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, the approved bridge facility will be disbursed in 6 tranches over a period of 6 months to the states. Each of the 36 states will have a total loan amount of 18.225 billion naira with a 30-year repayment period at an interest rate of 9%. The minister maintains that the facility is to help states cushion the repayment of previous bailout facilities guaranteed for them by the federal government. Recall that at its Monetary Policy Committee meeting in May this year, the central bank stressed that all states that benefited from the bailout loans will pay back, just as it has agreed that banks should recover their funds. Available data from civil society organization Budget Nigeria reveals that so far, a total of 1.75 trillion naira bailout facilities have been released to the 36 states of the Federation in the past 6 years. Some financial experts are concerned that previous bailout funds granted to states were allegedly mismanaged and unaccounted for. Others have advised governors to cut down on waste but ensure that every unit of expenditure delivers maximum value and impact for the benefit of the populace. As the state governments await the disbursement of this fresh loan facility, what impact will it have on ordinary Nigerians? Are there systems in place to ensure effective monitoring and utilization of the funds? These are some of the issues guests on the program will be speaking to shortly.
Thank you very much, Abdul Salam Jibril, for that background. We have 3 guests with us. They all are regular guests in terms of financial analysis. Dr. Becca Okengo, who is a development economist. Pleasure having you this morning.
Pleasure to be here. Good morning, Nigerians.
Niyi Akinsiju, financial and investment analyst. Delight for joining us for the program this morning. Do you mind? And from our Lagos Network Center, we have Shuaibu Idris, who is Managing Director, Timeline Consult. If he's there, yes. Shuaibu Idris, very good morning to you from Lagos.
Good morning, Kinsley, and good morning, Nigerians. Thanks for having me.
All right, so gentlemen, another bailout for the states. Looks like this is a recurring decimal. In 6 years, we've had like 4. This one has a 2-year moratorium and then to be repaid over a 30-year period. What does this tell us? I mean, just let's have your opening shot on this development, Dr. Okengu.
Thank you very much. I think what makes this a little bit spectacular is that there is an interest component to it. And it's also supposed to be helping states cushion the effects of the loans that are borrowed before. Now, cushion is a word which we must interrogate very carefully. And then it's also supposed to be helping the states, to weather the tide, as it were. And then in some states, they're also saying some of it is going to be applied into the payment or expenditure of recurrent expenditure, which is where you now capture, your salaries and emoluments. And this is where the danger comes. Because what this technically will mean is that you're actually borrowing money on an interest, that you're going to be using to pay salaries. That's danger number 1 that we must be able to dig in a little. 2, when you say you're not giving these loans to the states, you must also now remember that the states are not only made up of civil servants. You also have people who are not working in government. In most states have less than 10% of their population working in the civil service. So I don't also see how this loan has been, put together or structured to also now assist those who are not in formal engagement of the public sector. Now, that's another thing. Then you come to the point where I think we even have the greatest of our challenges. There are 2 levels of our relationship, what you call the exclusive list and then the concurrent list. are we going to be giving these loans to states on that concurrent basis? If we are, then does it mean that the federal government has a responsibility in the repayment of that loan? That's one. Two, if we are not, based on what statistics and data and evaluation and impact assessment or need study are we giving this money? And then we have come to this conclusion that is going to be 18 billion across board. Is this 18 billion on a pro rata basis based on somebody woke up in the morning? How did you come to this figure, 18 billion? You know, so these are the things I think in the course of this conversation, we might need to drill down if we're going to be making more sense, you know, out of this situation.
Me.
Oh, well, I think there's a need to understand the context of the bailout first, because this is actually a reaction, you know, to the history of the bailouts in Nigeria. One, we also need to review the prevailing situation or circumstances when this whole idea of bailouts commenced in 2015. I don't think there had been such intervention, you know, since the return to democracy in 1999 from the federal government to the state. But by 2015, we all know that the economy, the Nigerian economy was in a degenerate state, more or less. About 27 states were not paying salaries. And of course, not just salaries of their workers, salaries, I mean, pensions of their pensioners and all that. And there was a need for that intervention because, again, even at the level of the federal government had started borrowing money from commercial banks, you know, by that year. So it was a desperate situation. And even more than that, the states had garnered more than 775 billion naira, you know, secured from commercial banks at commercial rates, you know, to pay salaries over time between 2014 and 2015. So it was a degenerate state. So I think it was a vision of commitment and a need to provide succor for the environment, for the economy that motivated the administration of the President Buhari at that time, you know, to come up with this idea of intervention. Because without that intervention, we would just have gone into a state of depression after we'd gone to a recession, because we were going to go into that recession in 2016, whether we like it or not. We had lost more than 4% of our GDP between third quarter 2014 and second quarter 2015. The foreign exchange reserve had fallen to a low of $29 billion plus. SS crude account had fallen to a low of $2 billion from a high of $20 billion in 2008. Collective sum of debt had gone up to 63 billion, equivalent of $63 billion. So there was a need for that intervention. And quickly, and my wonder was at that time, when the president approved the sum of $2.1 billion LNG, if you remember, LNG dividends, you know, that should go straight to the states at that time. That would also be the first time, you know, the energy would be declaring profits in the public space. And that went straight to the states. The federal government also now, of course, encouraged the CBN, or directed the CBN. I don't want to use the word encourage. I mean, I don't want to use the word directed because of the relationship between, the legal relationship between the CBN and the federal government. But the CBN also, you know, supplemented that 2.1 billion with another $1.3 billion as intervention, you know, to the states. What the practical thing was, there was a need to save issues. There are so many states, at least about 30 states, that are more or less civil service states in this country. And once salaries are not paid, businesses and every economy comes to a standstill in those states, you know. And again, the economy itself, when salaries are not paid, also impacts liquidity, impacts production, you know, because again, you have to arrange it with household consumptions and all that and all that. So what I'm trying to say essentially is, we have this need to intervene in the situation between 2015 and 2017. Of course, I think what we are not properly talking about is a relationship between this new package, bailout package, and the loan that is due. I've been making private, investigation to know exactly which of those, because there are a number of them, which of them are due. I know that the $2.1 billion and the $1.3 billion, particularly from CBN, was given out at a 20 years tenor, with a 2 years moratorium. So which one exactly are we talking about repayment now? There was a DMO package restructuring program, of 575 billion naira of money already collected, credit collected from the commercial banks. They repackaged it and gave for a 2 years bond. Perhaps that is what the CBN is insisting the states had to pay back. Now, if the states pay back, at this time, we're just getting out of the COVID pandemic. We still have issues with household consumptions. We have issues with salary payment and all that. I think it's compassionate for the president to intervene again at this time. Of course, we can start asking questions about is it appropriate? How are we monitoring the expenditures arising from this intervention and all that? We can do that, but what is important is the logic of that intervention. And I think it was at the time there was that intervention, it was appropriate, and now it's still appropriate. The issue of transparency is another thing.
Ani, thank you so much for your opening comments there. Let's join Shaibu Idris, Managing Director, Timeline Consult in Lagos. Let's have your open comment on the latest bailout of the federal government to states, which some experts are saying that the states are being spoon-fed. What's your opinion?
Good morning, Jumai, once again. I will align my thoughts to the two previous speakers, Dr. and Ni. Basically, there is absolutely nothing new as far as bailout is concerned. The world over, European Union has bailed out Spain, have had to bail out Spain, bail out Greece, and quite a number of other countries. In the United States, there were instances where the U.S. government and indeed the U.S. Fed has bailed out either financial institutions, companies, or some of the other layers of state. So coming back home, what is in bailout? Absolutely nothing new. We've had it, and it appears is now becoming a recurring decimal, which is unfortunate. Now, the fundamental questions are, number one, what are the macro and microeconomic implications of the interventions by the central bank or the federal government in terms of bailout given to state? It is basically the process of money creation, ways and means. The federal government of Nigeria doesn't have so much excess revenue or resources to be able to lend to somebody. They are also borrowing. Now, when central bank intervenes by giving state government loans, what does it do? It creates money. When you create money and you pump money into a system, what happens? Devaluation, exchange rate becomes disequilibrium, and inflation becomes higher, interest rate becomes lower, and the economy is being distorted. I'm not saying that we shouldn't give out bailout to state. However, what are the credit considerations in giving out these loans? I'm aware of certain states that wanted to access the capital markets to raise bonds. The debt management office said, guys, you can't do this because your debt to revenue ratio has reached and in fact about to exceed the minimum threshold approved by the National Assembly as to how much money you can borrow. Now, if some of these states have had to be turned back from borrowing, why and how are they being allowed to access the 18 billion naira intervention. Another possible interrogation that we may need to look at is what Ni has said. Should we actually be allowing states to borrow money to pay for recurrent expenditure, to pay for consumption? This is an abnormality, and we should find a way to have some level of transparency in accessing this bailout, in utilizing the bailout, and in putting certain conditions such as what has the state been able to do as far as revenue, internal generated revenue is concerned. How are they able to improve? In the last 7 or 8 years that this intervention scheme started, what has been the changes from this state? You know, we are having serious challenges. Most of these governors appoint people who are not able to give them advice on how best to manage our resources. And most of those in government today, they are there not necessarily to add value, but to suck value. And now, when you don't have quality materials running the system, what happens? We end up with parasites, and the cycle continues. Now, we have had intervention or bailout that gave state money, 614 billion naira, if I can remember, in 2017, and it was supposed to be for 20 years. 2017 to today, if my mathematics or arithmetic is correct, it's certainly not up to 20 years. So that has not been repaid. Now you are coming back to take another bailout. Someone, somehow, somewhere should ask the question, what did you do with that money? How far have you done with the repayment? And why should we continue to give you additional money? And when you have a straitjacketed solution, one size fits all, for me, I have an issue with that. If Zamfara State, for example, or Yobe State are lepers as far as IGR, Internal Generated Revenue Collection, is concerned, is Lagos State, is Rivers State, is Kaduna State or Kano State on the same pedestal with this state? I think certain level of, if you like, equity should be brought into bear. And the earlier we begin to interrogate and be able, particularly the central bank and the federal government, be able to put some conditions critical, to be fulfilled by this state before drawdown to the from the bailout account is allowed, I think it will be better for all of us. But if we just sit down, we can't pay salary, and because the government is the largest spender, and if they don't pay salary, economy will be in a comatose stage, so give them money. The cycle will continue, unabated, and we shall be having a recurrent decimal that no one will know when it will ever end.
All right, thank you very much, Shuabu Idris, there for your opening comments. Back to the studios, Dr. Emeka Okengu. I mean, a number of issues that you three guests have raised. Perhaps you may wish to begin to elaborate on your initial points, and then take also on the comments raised by the other guests, the macro and micro economic implications of this, the credit considerations, and just plain understanding what this bailout is all about. I mean, it's a bit fuzzy now from what you guys are saying.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. I think let's start from what they call LNOB. It means leave no one behind. That is the new mantra, that guides the SDGs. Okay, let us put that as what it is we're talking about. And then the second word that is very popular now is what we call inclusive governance and inclusivity. Now, what it means is that everybody has a part. Everybody is accountable to what happens in a governance system. I'm trying to draw this so that we can get it as elementary as possible for all of us to be on the same page where we're driving to. Now, another word that we've also gotten into our balance is what they call enabler. Okay, and most of the times they say to you, government is supposed to play the role of enabler. okay, and then creating that environment that enables for business to be able to thrive. And then the fourth, which is even most important, is that we are pursuing a private sector-led growth system. If we put all this together, it simply means that government just has one very tiny role of oversight, if you may, and administration in whatever happens in the new governance culture. So when you start talking about government, and you're talking about government at the sub-national levels, remember that it does not stop at the state government, Kingsley. You still have the local government. And then what should bother you is, okay, fine, we want to bail out people. Is it only people in the states that pay salaries? What about those in the local governments? And again, each time I come and we talk about Nigeria, I say, give me the poorest state in Nigeria, and I'll tell you that the richest. And I keep using Yobe. You just mentioned Zamfara. The gold in Zamfara, from statistics coming from government, Nigeria had lost about $8 billion from illegal gold mined in Zamfara. And this was in the period between, I think, 2012 and 2014 or 15 or 16. This is NAITI report, is there. Now, you go to a place like Yobe. Yobe is blessed with bentonite clays or bentonic clays, out of which bentonite is made. And you do not need $1 billion to be able to establish a bentonite mine. Just like you do not need $1 billion to be able to set up a gold mining site. So what we are getting wrong, and this is where I think we're all mixing it up, is not to understand, starting from leave no one behind. Because what's going to be happening is that what people are going to be seeing is 18 billion being given to governors. And then the governors will say to you, we have used part of it to pay our subsisting debts, whatever it is. We have used the other part to pay salaries, whatever it is. We have used the other part to begin to do infrastructure, whatever it is. And then there is nothing to show on ground. But if we were to now recognize that we are faced with two very immediate problems, let me also please say publicly that the president has played his role as a father of a nation. There's no way you see your children, they are gasping for air, and you're able to help, and it's not helping. So there is nothing wrong with the presidency or the president saying, okay, it's important we help the states. But you also do not help somebody, and then in trying to help him, you create more problems, which is what I see that is happening now. And how do I mean? In the first place, if by the end of the day, 18 billion is seen, comes into a system, and not one job is created, what do you think is going to happen? Nobody is going to believe that you pay salary. Nobody is going to believe that you're building infrastructure that is not completed. But if 18 billion enters into a state, and you probably now say that what you want to do is that we're faced with two major crises now. Crisis number one is crisis of food insecurity. It's important to know that we are going to be facing a food crisis in the year to come. Imagine if the federal government had gone to the states to say, we have some concurrent things we can run together. Agriculture is one of them. Let's move away from agriculture and enter into food production. Out of this money, a certain percentage of it is going to be put into setting up facilities that will make certain that every state in Nigeria is food sufficient. One. Two, what are those minerals that you have that can be able to now help you start, getting credit worthy? Because against your mineral resources, against your institute values, you can actually begin to create what we call, institute value valuations that can give you money with the minerals you have on ground. Can we also apply some of this money into doing the proper exploration and resource determination of these resources? Out of these 450 minerals that we claim we have in the country, there is no local government that does not have one. I don't need a dictionary. Call your local government and I'll tell you what is there. So if we don't get to understand that we have Nigerians that are getting more disconnected, yes, you can pay out of a state of 3 million people and you're able to pay 100,000, maybe 18,000. How much do they earn at the state levels? What happens to the remaining 2.9 million people? So these Kingsley are the issues for me. And until we're able to interrogate it and be a little bit more circumspect in understanding, that we are actually, and then you're talking about the macro and macro indices. you must be able to balance them, because the moment you also throw this money, if it is not well managed, like my big brother has said, you're going to be staggering the economy, and you're going to be now creating this bubble that can upset, you know, your economy, and then throw you into more inflationary trends if you're not very careful.
Mr. Nee, the bailout is not just peculiar to Nigeria, and Shaibu Idris raised a point that there's disparity in disbursement of these funds. States that are due to population, the constituency itself, some states shouldn't be getting the same amount with other states, like it's done in America. Bigger states got bigger bailouts. So why is a place like Zamfara or Kebbi receiving the same amount with Lagos, Kano, Kaduna, Port Harcourt? Does it make sense here?
I think we need to understand the context of this present bailout. It's actually a replacement. A particular bailout has been due since 2019 for repayment. And the governors collectively appealed to the CBN to stave off, you know, the deductions. And of course, because of the threat of COVID-19, the pandemic and all that, it was decided that it would be extended into 2020. And from 2020, it was extended again into 2021. But the CBN insisted that this money, these particular deductions, had to be made because they are actually restructured program, bonds, you know, the money collected from the commercial banks. You know, that's what this repayment was meant for. So essentially, 614 billion naira was supposed to be deducted from the accounts of the states. And the governors, I think, made an appeal to the president that if this was removed from the account, it would also put them perhaps back into the reds. And it was out of that compassion that the president decided to replace, that I'm using the word replace as principal, you know, terminology, to replace that deduction that was supposed to have been effected. So it's actually to provide some liquidity, you know, for the state governors. Now, I mean, for the state government. Now, what is at play, to my mind, is to say that the equity that's supposed to be applied must have been as a result, you know, of the nature of this bailout. It's not attending to particular needs. So it's likely, and of course I'm not the mouthpiece of the Ministry of Finance, but I'm believing that it's likely to be that these deductions would also be based on this percentage, this equal format, you know. So if it's that, I think it's just it's like just taking one ball, apple for apple. That's my consideration, because it's not about attending to a need. It's about replacing one bailout that had been given out, and perhaps that deduction is perhaps 18.2 billion naira would be deducted from each state, and you are now replaced. The federal government is replacing that 18.2 billion. That's the way I can.
Even with the bailout, some states are still not paying salaries.
Of course. So that is where we now start talking about transparency. You know, that's why we start questioning, you know, the mode of disbursement and the mode of payment. Even in 2016, when the crisis was intense, when the economy was in a recession, states collected this money. They refused to pay, you know, and that was, to my mind, was criminal. So much that the president asked some governors, how do you sleep soundly, you know, in the night when your workers had not been paid? And especially when funds had been made available, you know, by an avuncular government, for instance, federal government, for instance. So you collected that money. In fact, the government at that time insisted that this money was not meant for contracts, was not meant to be to pay contractors or to go and start infrastructural development or whatever. It was principally targeted at salary payment and pension. And well, the reality of our economy today is that the recurrent side, you know, of the economy is huge. That's the truth. It's huge. So, and I'm trying to address Doc's position here, about if this money perhaps had been, directed into, targeted into some more functional, productive segment of the economy. Makes sense. But even in our national budgets, 70% most of the time recurrent. And it reflects down the line at the subnational levels. So as it is, payment of salary and pensions are important. And I think the federal government intervening at this level is proper. But again, there should be a huge issue around monitoring and transparency.
Okay, Neil, thank you. Back to Shuaibu Idris in Lagos. Shuaibu Idris, I mean, let's take a step back in trying to understand the source of all of this bailout and so on and so forth. They said state governments had borrowed from commercial banks. Why would a state government borrow from a commercial bank? At some point years ago, it was fashionable for state governments to be saying that they were raising bonds on the capital market. Of course, that will come under the purview of the Securities and Exchange Commission. But, well, you have repayment to make, whether from commercial banks or whether from bonds sourced from the capital market. But what kind of financial management led to all of this that we are now seeing the consequence in terms of the bailout? And then going forward, I mean, 30 years from now, when these loans are due, well, some of us might not be around, some of us might be around, it could very well lead to even more intractable financial issues. How did we get into all of this miasma of borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and we are looking for the appropriate human development indices, and they are far away?
Kingsley, let me first pray that in 30 years' time, me and you will be there to witness when these states will be able to pay back these loans. Amen. There's absolutely nothing wrong, and it's absolutely nothing new for a state or local government or federal government to borrow either from the capital market or from the money market, as we dimension the two markets. The capital market, which is bonds, or the sukuk, that is the Islamic bond that is now fashionable in Nigeria. And then the money market is to access money through or from the commercial banks. It is normal, and no one should fault the state or a local government that decides to go that window. When I was working as a banker, I can quickly remember a local government by name Kiana in Nasarawa State approached us in the commercial bank where I was working, and we lent money to them. This was during the military days, and of course they used the money to execute certain projects, and they paid back. So Kingsley, it is normal for commercial banks to lend money to state government. The challenge is fundamentally is what are they using the money for? If you borrow money to fund consumption, that is a killer pill you are taking on your in your body. You should borrow to fund investment. My elder brother, Dr. Emeka Okengu, has already alluded to that fact. You have states that have certain level of potential economic activities that monies can be borrowed and utilized so that the economy can be regenerated, and then employment created, and then monies and wealth is going to be created. What we have is generally a bit of a cancerous situation. What is this cancerous situation? Number one, we have an excessively over-bloated bureaucracy or administration or civil service, which our economy can ill afford to support. Number two, we are running a federal system. And federalism, posit that the center cannot, should not, and must not be prognosing in what the component governments are doing. For example, President Buhari can't interrogate or question a state governor on why he or she is doing this or doing that. It is a challenge. However, with bailout and with central bank taking our commonwealth to give to states, it is an opportunity, like Nee said, to insist, what are you doing with this money? What are you going to be doing with this money? We are all aware that there were states that collected the bailout in 2015 and another bailout in 2017, yet neither the pension of the retired civil servant nor the gratuities of the retiring civil servant, talk less of the salaries of the current civil servants, were paid. So why should we continue to give them? Gentlemen and lady, remember, we are approaching election. Can we really say in the last 5-6 years there was any month that came and passed without the Federation Account Allocation Committee meeting and distributing funds from the center? And if there was none, no matter how little you got some money from the center, you were also getting money from your IGR, no matter how little. Why were this state not able to be reducing this debt? And because we are approaching election, almost everybody, the system is now being heated because 2023 is around the corner. Are we not likely going to see another diversion of these bailout funds? Maybe to fund the election, maybe to fund other, if you like, luxury expenditure. I think it is high time to look at these issues pragmatically. No one is saying don't help the state. I mean, if President Buhari or Governor Emefiele does that, then they become a little inhuman. But thank God they are human and they are ready to come to the aid of the state. However, why and how should those monies be spent, and why should we even give them? And like I did say, a one-size-fits-all is dangerous. Some of these states have had internally generated revenues. Some of these states are already challenging even the government on value-added tax distribution. Some of these states, I remember the chairman of the Governors Forum was challenging the federal government on Paris Club disbursement and a number of things that these governors were doing. So you chastise the federal government, and then when it suits you, you run to them for cover. And the federal government appears to be, quote unquote, helpless. They are desperate, we need to help them, and we help them. But if I must help you, you must be able to help yourself so that I can help you better.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, no, Juma, that's fine. I will take it up from there. I just wonder, there's one aspect of this conversation in terms of borrowing that, of course, led to more borrowing and more fire at the feet of the states. But what is the role of a development bank? If we've been hearing that you are going to take a bond from the capital market to build a market or to develop roads, X, Y, Z, what is it? Nigeria has a development bank now. Although the central bank appears to be performing all functions from retail, commercial banking, through development banking, through merchant banking, and so on and so forth. Why haven't we looked at this option of development banking? And then an allied question to that, I know that, gentlemen, we all probably know the answer. Are the state legislators asleep when these requests come for borrowing? We can go first and then Neil.
I think let's before we go to the development banks, let's go to the Federal Ministry of Budget, National Planning, because that's very key. Because this is a ministry that has run at least 4 or 5 national, what they call national technical working groups on infrastructure development. And so there are documentations And I have been privileged to be at least part of two, and I'm actually in one now. I was in the 2020 Vision 2020. I was in the 30-year infrastructure master development plan, and I'm now in the midterm and the long-term national technical development plan. And there are documents. And you want to wonder, what role has those outputs played in now this funding you're talking about? And then that brings it to this, what we call development funding. Now, first and foremost, you need to give a definition to development, because development, it does not have one meaning. To you, development might be social infrastructure. To me, development might be critical infrastructure. And both of them could be the same kind of infrastructure. Whereas a hospital will be critical infrastructure to somebody who lives in a rural area, it might be social infrastructure to you that lives in an urban area that already has a hospital. So in also plotting development, it's not a one-way trajectory. And if I dare to say, I'm almost certain that the loan that Idris could have given to Kiana local government when he was in the bank might have been for them to be able to develop their by right endowment. Because Kiana is a local government that is heavily endowed with the mineral by right. I will be shocked if it doesn't tie to it, either infrastructure to that mine or the mine itself. So I think the major problem that we have in discussing development financing is the outputs of development financing, because there are two things you expect out of development financing. One can come in terms of what you call return on equity. Another one can come in return on investment, because development has a social component, just like it also has an economic component. So it is not something you wake up and you think through. And again, the question we should also be asking is, does the government not have a credit committee like you have in banks? And the banks that lent these monies to these states, upon what premise did they lend the money to them? Upon what guarantees were those monies issued to them? Were they issued against their FACA accounts, or were they issued against, and what projects were those monies supposed to have gone into? Because I do not see any bank lending any state money, to go and start paying salaries. Usually the states will bring a project and say, fund this project, and maybe out of it, X, Y, Z. For me, what I thought we should be discussing today is the report of the loans already issued, due to be paid and not paid. I mean, all of us are Nigerians, and we have that right. That is where accountability, that is where transparency comes in. Because by the time the Federal Ministry of Finance establishes or sets up an audit team to be able to now run an audit on the monies that's been released already and make it public, it becomes a little more enduring. People are more careful what they do with public funds. And then those you need to call out are called out. Of course, bailout is necessary, but you need to give a proper definition to bailout. And then, like you said, these people, I was doing a review for a ministry, and then I found out that this ministry had spent a lot of his money, on programs. And meanwhile, the ministry has an insurance company, they have a bank, and I said to them, what role did your insurance company play in these projects you did? And what role did this bank that you own play in making certain that you now pull in this money and that you trace it? And you find out that nothing much. And because you don't have that audit system, you don't have that system that now ensures that you have timelines and outputs, okay, there is no time you can be able to now flag. All you need to do is, by the end of the day, a report is produced, and then somebody says, oh, because of this and that and that and that, we are keeping this project or this program in view. And because you do not have that insurance cover to it, nobody is calling out anybody. So for me, I think moving forward, what we owe our country, because right now we talk about 30 years, 40 years. I don't want to be here in the next 30 years. I don't want to be here, because but I'm going to have kids who will start having their own children in 30 years. And then they're going to be looking at my grave and saying, what kind of man, what kind of economist was this character? You were there and we borrowed money. You put these debts on children that are not being born. This 30-year, 20-year is for your children and their children. They're going to pay the money. And they're going to be paying it at 9%. And you're looking at an economy that is fast losing its value. 18 billion 10 years ago, you have divided it by 310 or maybe 197. 18 billion today, you will need to divide by 411 if you're using the official rate to be able to get the real value, because 80% of what that 80 billion is going to be doing is going to be dollarized, if we like it or not. So what do you think is going to be happening in the next 15, 20, 30 years when we're not able to shore up our own currency, okay, to now start getting some kind of weight to be able to now, resist this onslaught coming from this dollarization of our economy? So not to take a lot of your time, in answering you very simply, Development Bank of Nigeria, we should ask, what have they done? Where have they participated? Who funds them? What is their capital outlay? Can they even, again, do the basics for themselves? How do they get their funding? Bank of Agriculture of Nigeria, who funds them? How do they get their funds? Can they also even perform this, function as Bank of Agriculture? NAIC of Nigeria. These are issues. These are people you must be able to get into your loan system if you're going to be securing it end to end. And if these people do not participate, you might end up singing to the choir, because it will be a disaster foretold. Because what we just have now is Mr. President in his magnanimity and his fatherliness, and he owes that all. You can't cry to your father and he's able to help. But what the president should do or does is to be able to give anticipatory approvals. And then based on that, his anticipatory approval, what you now do is that you begin to now drill. You now have people who are supposed to now make certain that when the president says help, he doesn't mean give. Okay, he means do it right. And those who are supposed to do it right, this is where we should be calling out the National Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. Against what indices, against what data, against what programs, okay, are you releasing this money? And then you are supposed to be developing these KPIs. Show us your monitoring template. What have you been able to do? Show us your results for month 1 to month 6. How have you been able? Give us even a sub-national, a situation analysis based on the KPIs that you have developed. And most of them were discussed when they had, the retreat with Mr. President. Can we be able to see those outcomes? And then if these people do not qualify and yet they need help, can they now be helped? And again, I don't think it's proper, because we have the concurrent relationship between the federal government and the state government. So there's a meeting point. It is not exclusive. States cannot do what they want to do. If they could, why would the EFCC be inviting commissioners of finance? Why wouldn't they let them be? So there is also some function that the federal government has, a role. The president can call a state governor to order, to say, my friend, this is federal government money you're spending. We need to know how you're doing it. And this is why we now have these security agencies, torchlighting most of these programs. So I think, well, I don't know.
Dr. Emeka, you think you should know you've raised a lot of pertinent, questions here, but I believe our other guests will have time to respond to it when we come back from this break. Don't go away.
COVID-19, that is the black swan of the century, has actually hit the whole world very hard, even the strongest of economies, and Nigeria was not spared. But due to the proactive stance and steps that the president has taken, we've been able to come out quickly. The president has consistently said we must invest in infrastructure, even as we're investing in human capital, that we must invest in infrastructure, because at the end of the day, that is what will bring about a sustainable economic growth. So the president has given us our directive. He has said you must make sure you pay salaries and pay pensions, but you also make sure that the critical projects of roads, railway, airports, bridges, major infrastructure that are meant to drive the growth of the economy, that we consistently invest in them, even if we have to continue to borrow to do so.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
We are all Nigerians. Against all odds, we shall and must remain united. We may have our challenges, our problems, and setbacks. However, together we shall overcome them all. What doesn't break us shall make us stronger. This is the mindset that shall bring peace, progress, and prosperity to our beloved country. Do not let tribal and religious sentiments govern how you think, act, or feel. Don't be influenced by those who want to destroy our precious national unity. Everybody who is a Nigerian is your brother and your sister. This is the mindset of the new Nigeria. It is also the mindset that we must all adopt. Let us support each other in creating the Nigeria of our dreams. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
He's falling sick so frequently, either fever or stomachache. I keep him away from junk food.
She also feeds me apples. She says an apple a day keeps...
If you want to keep germs away, then also wash your hands regularly with Dettol soap.
Meaning?
Germs and disease spread through the hand also. For this, use Dettol soap. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol soap is endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association. Be Dettol sure.
You're welcome back and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Dr. Emeka raised a lot of pertinent questions, Ni Akisuju, and one question I need to ask you, it is not peculiar to Nigeria, they said bailout. I remember the debate on the floor of the Congress when Biden suggested bailout for states in America. Why is it in Nigeria, the citizens, the people are not carried along? We just hear about it on the news that so-so and so-so amount has been approved. How, if people are not involved in it, how do they monitor the spending?
Yeah, well, it's the relationship between the government and the governed, you know, it's not about, it's not a tea party. It's not a picnic. The government wants a docile people. It is the responsibility of the people to become active in monitoring the course and actions of government. So the more docile people are, the more comfortable the government, at what level we are talking about.
Who makes them docile?
It is the people. So, we talk about democracy. Let's talk democracy a bit. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. So it's about the consciousness of the people. It is about the awareness of the people of their rights and their power. So I don't need a government to tell me something is happening to know that something is happening. As a citizen, it is my responsibility because I occupy the office of the #1 powerful person, you know, in the Constitution. That's the Constitution had even imbued me with the power to ask questions. So if things are happening, and that's what we try to, I don't want to use the word incite, to tell Nigerians, we should not sit back in the matters of government and governance. It is our responsibility to monitor the activities, policies of governments. You know, and the more we do that, thankfully we have a social media now. Unlike before when we had a structured media system. Now everybody has a space to ventilate his or her position. And the way you see it, the most important thing is to be knowledgeable and informed about this position. And when I heard about this bailout, I did my own private investigation to know exactly what the whole thing is about, this 18.2 billion. You know, what's it about? And what pains me is that it may actually be a replacement for money governors secured from commercial banks at very, very high rates. And that if that had been left, you know, without being managed by the federal government, we would have even had a bigger issue now. Of course, compounded interest and all that. So between 2017 and now, you can only imagine what the total volume of the loan would have been. But again, at that time, the intervention by the federal government, the way I remember it, was that the DMO was to restructure this loan, you know, and convert it into a bond for to create comfort and convenience for the payments. And of course, it was given a 2 years tenure and at 14% instead of the more than 30% that it was secured. In the first instance, it was criminal to secure a loan to pay salaries at that high amount. Where are you going to pay? Even if you are using FAC as standing collateral, are you going to collect that FAC and invest it in a project or in an instrument that will earn you interest to now use that to pay off the loan when it's due? These are questions we should ask. But the important thing now is that the federal government had provided convenience. Going forward, the citizen should be conscious, because now somebody, the Lagos guest talks about direction, talks about the oncoming 2023 election. And yes, we have 18.2 billion that would be disbursed over the next 6 months from the federal government to the state government. Now, can we have citizens in those 36 states, make it their responsibility to see how this is expended, to monitor how this is disbursed, to even know when this money arrives the states, and from there start monitoring it. So we are not, the federal government cannot possibly hold the states accountable, to some of these things. We always have to, the talk about federal government state relationship will come in. It is the people, at those levels. Now let us talk about this World Bank $750 million state financial, fiscal transparency, accountability, and sustainability program. That is a program, created to encourage transparency and accountability. Now, you will now imagine that just about 24 states passed and at different grades. What happened to the 12 outstanding states out of the 36 states? So we are saying that 12 states are grossly mismanaged in terms of transparency and accountability. I want to see people talk in those states, because this is it's not something we should just wave off. It means that a grading system has been applied to transparency and accountability in those states, and even there is a reward for any form of transparency. Up to $750 million was shared. 12 states did not have a share out of that.
Is there a monitoring system?
It is. It is based on that World Bank monitoring system that the gradings were made. So it tells you the kind of gap that needs to be filled in terms of citizen holding the state government or even any political official to account.
Well, thanks a lot. For the many points that you gentlemen have raised. One of the issues now has to do with very little or unsustained interrogation of the financial affairs of state governments. The same way you find with elections, state independent electoral commissions, they conduct elections and the ruling party wins 99.9999%. In all cases, everybody comes to Abuja. I say that's where our problem is. That's where our problem is. When they know that you are in Abuja, they will say, "You are the cause of our challenges." But right under our noses, in the states and the local governments, there are key issues to engage civil society and other activists with regard to proper financial monitoring. And this relates also. The question is going to Shuaibu Idris. Look, let's look back. We lived in this country at a time when state governments were investing in industries, or even though the lingo now is government has no business in business. But state governments had investments in businesses. So when they say they have borrowed these monies either for development or otherwise, yes, you can see an airport, whether it has up to 1,000 passengers in a year passing through, it's a different consideration. But money for value or value for money, are we seeing that in terms of the borrowing? And more importantly, when do we begin to apply the brakes? Because we shouldn't forget that the debt crisis that Nigeria suffered for several decades before we got the reprieve in 2006, a lot of it arose from state borrowing. State borrowing, especially during the Second Republic. State borrowing, people, they were just going to foreign creditors, private creditors, like commercial banks, and borrowing anyhow. Now, this one is internal borrowing, and we are seeing how it's exploding in their faces. What can be done? It looks like fiscal responsibility isn't quite a strong point amongst a number of the states.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Before I answer that question, let me just clarify something on development banks in Nigeria. While I have never worked with any one of them and I'm not their mouthpiece, I think quite a number of them are doing significantly well in terms of intervention, both at nano, micro, and small and medium scale enterprises. I'm sure most of us are familiar with what Bank of Industries is able to do, what Development Bank of Nigeria has been able to do, and to a large extent what Bank of Agriculture has been able to do. Recently, the president has caused, the implementation of what is called an infrastructural company, which will be funded significantly from the federal purse, so that there will be some PPP, private-public sector partnership, in getting infrastructure across the length and breadth of the country. Now, fast forward, the issue of why are we not discussing even this bailout? Jumai alluded to the fact that when Biden wanted to intervene by giving out bailout to subnational government in the U.S., there was debate, and people got to know. I will say fundamentally 2 or 3 issues that are a bit peculiar to us in Nigeria. Number one, generally we don't pay taxes. Most of the government spendings is from what is being collected from oil revenue and a few other sources, company income tax, that is a must, and a few other taxes. But if you take an average Nigerian, how many of us pay tax? Maybe some of us that are on payroll, we are compelled to pay taxes on a pay as you go. So there is a bit of a lethargy, I don't care attitude. After all, since I don't pay tax, so why should I bother? Number two, this hobnobbing by the National Assembly with the executive is also beginning to reach a crescendo and to be a bit of a negative. What do I mean? You don't need to be rancorous with the executives before you perform your oversight function. These borrowings, this bailout money is our money. Should Central Bank or Mr. President give out states these loans without ventilating or without sanction, without review, without approval of the National Assembly? To my mind, the National Assembly should have had an oversight so that interrogation and transparency can be even better managed. When you look at where we are today, yes, government has no business in business, but government has business in ensuring that business runs well. And in so doing, there are certain areas, certain parts of our businesses that government needs to start, or at least encourage some level of partnership with private sector. Why is Nigerian Air going to take off second quarter of next year with 49% equity participation of private sector? That is a good PPP. States like Zamfara, why can't they partner? If they must borrow from the international capital markets or from the local capital market or even from the banks, why can't they partner with, say, a gold mining company to be able to set a gold mine? Like Dr. Emeka has said, if barite is available in Yobe, why can't Yobe partner with any company, be it Chinese, Korean, European, or Asian, companies, to be able to develop and mine, the mineral resources? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They can borrow money either from the commercial bank, because the commercial bank will definitely review critically, the transaction to be able to make sure that the transaction will be able to be sustainable and be able to pay the loans. Again, at the Ministry of Finance, Federal Ministry of Finance level, as well as the Budget and National Planning Office, there may be a need to have a bit of a credit or lending committee that should be populated with quality, bankers that are experienced in lending and credit, such that issues like these, just like the Economic Advisory Committee set up by the government, issues like this can easily be interrogated by this committee and advice be given to the government. We are in political dispensation, we are in democracy. Sometimes issues that are supposed to be looked at strictly on their merit, we put some emotion, we put sentiments, we put political consideration into them. But even then, if we have technocrats, if we have quality materials that could be distilling some of these requests, I believe the debt overhang that we can clearly see in the next 3-5 years, if care is not taken, not just the state, even the federal government of Nigeria could be having a debt challenge. We are currently heading to $33-34 billion debt situation. This is worrisome, and unfortunately for us, very unfortunately, is our internally generated revenue, instead of increasing, it is even decreasing, both at the federal and the state. Our accretion level to revenue, which even the finance minister has always said Nigeria's problem is not debt, it's revenue. What are we doing to address this? Why should we be giving states bailout, one bailout after another, without asking them, why have you not been able to improve your revenue generation? What are you doing to improve the revenue, internally generated revenue in your state? I think these are issues that both the central bank and the federal government should be able to look at. I personally still believe that by the provision of our constitution, it is practically impossible for Mr. President to have any serious oversight on any governor, because it will be deemed as unconstitutional.
All right, Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much there for your views and also your suggestions. Gentlemen in the studios here with us, Emeka and Niyi, let's get your closing thoughts on this. We know that it probably is a subject that we'll return to at some point, whether it's the viability of states, whether it's a function of revenue allocation formula, because even if you were to completely alter it, probably the same situation will persist. But how do we ensure greater financial scrutiny at the state levels, including also the local government levels, and ensuring that at the end of the day there is value for money? You don't go to just borrow money, and you are looking for the evidence. You find overpriced contracts all over the place.
In one word, measured inputs, okay, as against predetermined outputs. Very simple. Whatever it is you put in must have an output, be it on your equity, be it on your return on investments, be it on your infrastructure, social, or critical. Now, federal government has so many resources, so many facilities. You will be shocked. Now, look at China. China had come up one day and they are promoting a new grass now, that they are growing their grasses for feeding their cattle in the desert. Those grasses can be grown all over Borno, China. Well, they have a Chinese embassy here. There's a company promoting that grass in Nigeria. So it is all about us getting, inputs that ties to clear outputs. The day we begin to do that, that's the day we'll start singing a new song.
Yeah.
Well, I think the template is in the public space. The president, in his wisdom, signed the Order 10, financial independence for judiciary and the legislature. I think that will go a long way if it's allowed to work. Once the judiciary and the legislative arm of government at the subnational level have the right of first line draw, it reduces their dependence on the state governments, and it allows them to be more independent and perhaps more active in relating with the executive arm at that level. And of course, with a more robust activism at the level of the state parliaments, I think it will trickle down to the mass of the people too.
Okay, Ni Akisuju, financial and investment analyst. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. Dr. Emeka Okongwu, a development economist. As usual, is a pleasure.
Farmer.
And a farmer too. Thank you so much for your input. And in our Lagos studio, we're joined by Shoaibu Idris, Managing Director, Timeline Consults Limited. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have your input on the topic on discussion today. Thank you so much for coming. Sport Update is next.
Manchester United prepared for the arrival of interim manager Ralf Rangnick by earning a battling point against Premier League leaders Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. United, under the caretaker charge of Michael Carrick, with Rangnick's appointment expected to be confirmed imminently, kept Cristiano Ronaldo on the bench and mounted a largely rearguard action until Jadon Sancho hit Chelsea on the break 5 minutes after half-time. Sancho pounced on poor control from Jorginho to race clear and beat Edouard Mendy with a composed finish after the hosts had dominated possession. Chelsea was stung into action and Jorginho made amends for his error when he equalised from the spot in the 69th minute. In boxing, unheralded Australian George Kambosos Jr. stunned American Teofimo Lopez on a split decision in New York to become the unified world lightweight champion. The 28-year-old won 115 to 111, 113 to 114, and then 115 to 112 on the judges' scorecards to claim the WBA, WBO, and IBF belts.
All right, let's go over now to foreign scene. A lot of action there in the sporting world, but let's check out some foreign stories.
The Southern African sister countries.
South Africa's president has condemned travel bans enacted against his country and its neighbors over the new coronavirus variant, Omicron. Cyril Ramaphosa has said he was deeply disappointed by the action, which he described as unjustified, and called for the bans to be urgently lifted. The United Kingdom, the European Union and the United States are among those who have imposed travel bans. Omicron has been classified as a variant of concern, and early evidence suggests it has a higher reinfection risk. The heavily mutated variant was detected in South Africa earlier this month and is responsible for most of the infections found in South Africa's most populated province, Gauteng. Elsewhere, critical talks with Iran to prevent the collapse of a nuclear deal are to resume in Vienna, Austria, after 5 months. Officials will discuss the possible return of the United States to the 2015 Accord, which limited Iran's nuclear activities in return for the lifting of sanctions. Iran has violated key commitments since then-President Donald Trump pulled out in 2018 and reinstated U.S. sanctions. U.S. President Joe Biden is willing to lift them if Iran reverses the breaches, but it wants the United States to make the first move. Iran insists that its nuclear program is entirely peaceful.
That's it at Good Morning Nigeria for today, Monday. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 in the morning. To take care of yourselves, I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Juma Yusuf. Before we go, don't forget to join NTA in the fight against rape and rapists. Do have a great day. I'm Juma Yusuf. Bye.